My parents were always big readers, and I feel like that's how I first became a writer. I think that our weekends would sort of end with everyone, lounging around the couch reading books. And my mother is a children's storyteller, and so it was definitely something in the air in my family, although I think I originally wanted to be a ballerina and a veterinarian and lots of sort of random career plans. But I always loved to read, and I think that for me translated very naturally into wanting to write. There was no pressure. It was just something that was valued in my house. I felt like reading was something so beloved, and I was one of those kids who were always buried inside of a book. And so I think the idea that I could create that kind of world that I was entering in was thrilling. But it felt, I think having my parents be supportive of the arts made me feel like I could take this chance and see if I could do this. It made me feel like I could try something very impractical, and I guess the way I viewed it was I could always go to law school later. They did. They were very supportive, and I think they believed in the idea that this is a real career. This, it might not look like other careers, it might not have the same practical placement and ideas, but that this was something valuable to do. I've written 2 novels, and I'm hopefully finishing final touches on a 3rd novel. My first novel was called The Ladies' Auxiliary, and it was about the Jewish community in Memphis where I grew up. And my second book, I guess, which was published 5 years after that, was called The Outside World, and I was interested in exploring religious differences in the Jewish world and looking at how families cope with religious differences within a family. And my 3rd book is called Visible City, and I've been working on it for what feels like forever, but I think it's done or almost done. They come from lots of different places. There's always sort of I always feel like there's the initial burst of an idea, and it always feels like, oh, that would be interesting. My first book was about a woman who converted to Orthodox Judaism and moved to the very small Orthodox Jewish community in Memphis where I grew up. And so that was triggered by a specific conversation. I had a friend who had converted, who made a joking comment about what if she had moved to Memphis. But my desire to write about this community, I think, was there well before this conversation. I think I was looking for the specific plot idea or the specific character, but I'd always wanted to write about community and about what it means to be an insider in a community and what it means to be an outsider. And I think those are issues that I think have been prominent in my life in lots of ways. And so it's sort of a mixture of taking ideas from the outside and then using things that are inside myself and trying to marry those two together in some ways. I try not to think about audience. I think that I have a negative audience in mind. Like I think of them as my internal censors, like what will they say if? And I've worked very hard to shed myself of those. So I think I do best when I try not to think about a reader on the other end of it, but just to think about the writing itself, because I too easily get caught up in imagining responses and critical responses. I think if I push that away, I do better. I write more freely. Different writers. Yeah. I guess growing up, I grew up in Memphis, Tennessee, and grew up reading Southern writers, where I was always thrilled by Eudora Welty and Flannery O'Connor, and the sense of voice that they have. Recently, I've been reading a lot of David Grossman, who's an Israeli novelist, and I love just his words. I feel like his language and his capacity to convey emotion on the page moves me. And whenever I come away reading a book from his, I feel like I've not just read it, but sunk inside the sentences. I can almost live inside his words, and that is something that always moves me to think about writing and about the work I want to do, and just could spend days inside one of his novels. I sort of read randomly, I think. I mean, sometimes I read because of what I am. Sometimes I read something because it's helpful to me for what I'm writing. I feel like it was very helpful for me when I was writing my first 2 books to read novels of people dealing with religious worlds, whatever they were. And so I felt like, or books where people were grappling with communal strictures, because that was so important to me in my work. And so I found that reading Indian writers was really helpful. I loved reading Brick Lane by Monica Ali. I felt like it might have been worlds away in some sense from what I was writing about, but it was also so close to home in terms of navigating how one maintains tradition, how one becomes oneself. And so I think those books tend to speak to me, and I find them useful for what I'm writing. And sometimes I just read randomly and just find things that move me, and certain books just stay with me like that. The writing process is scattered in some ways. I guess writing with 3 small children makes it have to be to some degree, but I guess I've been on the tail end of a book for longer than I probably was inside of the book. It's sort of been this very bizarre few years for me of endless revising, which did not happen with my first 2 books. And I think it's been a growth experience for me. I have to view it as a growth opportunity to have to go back to a book again and again. But I try to just push. So I feel like it's a constant feeling of like, well, I guess actually the initial writing is sort of the formulating, and I don't write with outlines. I sort of write very associatively. One idea will lead me to the next, to the next. Then there's this shaping place. That feels like it creates a big, big mess on my laptop screen. And then there's the trying to order it and put it into some kind of shape. And then there's a very, very long period, you know, the years of revising it and asking myself, well, what is this scene really about? What is this character really doing here? Have I pushed far enough? Is this, you know, I can spot the places where I'm rushing or trying to get through, to get out of a scene, you know, without having to really expend too much time on it. And I try to calm myself on those and say, no, got to go back to that one. And just keep, it feels like sort of slowly inching towards the end. What's funny, one of the pieces of advice I got was from Mary Gordon, who was one of my teachers, who said, if you can be anything else besides a writer, you should do that. And so, on one hand, I hear that, but I also feel like when I think about what my kids are going to do when they grow up, I feel like there's a luxury in choosing something that you love, but also I feel like for a writer, I feel like it's about the pursuit of human emotional truth. I think I would advise them to sort of to seek that emotional truth, to really pursue it and not to stop at what we're supposed to feel and what we're supposed to think, but to go beyond it, even when people don't want to hear it. I think that the gift of reading and writing is that we go to those places that that are uncomfortable, and I think this has been my own journey as a writer, my own pushing myself not to stop at the outer truths, the outer presumptions, but that the writer's job is not to provide answers, but to ask the hard questions and to go deeper inside something, even when it becomes messy and painful. I do. I think there's the sense that writing is not real work. People say, well, you're not really working now, are you? And you know, the sense that you're just sort of playing around on your laptop, or that it's not valued, I think, in the same way as if you were a professional of another kind. And I think that for me, one of those particular challenges is writing with children, where because the job is always expendable in a certain way, because the urgency is that I have to finish this chapter today because that's where I am in the book, as opposed to I have a business meeting. I think that is the challenge. And I think, you know, I think about a room of one's own all the time as someone who's been in search of a room of one's own, but I also think about it as an internal room of one's own, of needing the internal space protected to write and to explore and to craft the sense of privacy that I think being a writer needs, and to surround yourself with people who understand what it means to push at boundaries and who are comfortable with the idea that life is used in a novel and it's never a one-to-one relationship, but that it's almost like taking wax figures and crafting them as you wish, but who can give you that emotional space. But I think the idea of trying to write, certainly these days, I think people talk about the death of the novel or the death of the literary world, but the idea that this is a career that is valuable as an art form that requires years of work where you don't necessarily see the rewards in the tangible ways that we're used to measuring value.